is here, and welcome to this very special part of my channel where together with experts we discuss everything related to innovations, breakthroughs, co-creation, collaboration, how to manage processes in collaboration projects, how to increase the chances of making a breakthrough, how to foster innovation, and more. In this video, I'm talking to Dr. Rolf Albach. Dr. Albach studied chemistry in Bonn and the Technical University of Munich. He also holds a dual MBA degree from the WHU Otto Beisheim School of Management and Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University in Chicago. Rolf started his career in 1994 when he joined Bayer in research, application technology, sales, and post-merger integration in the polyurethanes business unit. Dr. Albach has been working on a voluntary basis on environmental policy for over 30 years. He was working at NGOs, associations, as well as in local and regional government organizations. Rolf is also a member of the board of the Society of German Chemists and head of its group Association for Chemistry and Economics. I met Rolf this summer at the Materials Week conference where he was representing the industry and talking about the importance of its transformation. I'm very grateful that he agreed to discuss with me collaboration between the industry and academia and its challenges, environmental policy in general, popular in the European Union safe and sustainable by design framework, and many other topics. I learned a lot during this interview, though right now I actually have even more questions to him, but I hope it will be as valuable to you as it was for me. Hello, Rolf. Hello. It's so nice to see you here today, and thank you so much for joining. Despite all the technical difficulties, we made it, and thank you for having this conversation with me.
Well, it's a pleasure. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I'm looking forward.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions for you today. We will be talking about collaboration. We'll be talking about some topics connected to sustainability and environmental policies. But to start our conversation with, I'd like to ask about your experience, about your background. Your background is in chemistry and you're focused on polymers, so it would also be nice to know why did you decide to go in this field?
Well, this starts with the old saying that diamonds are a girl's best friend, and gemstones were my best friend when I was something like 16 or 17. So I was collecting crystals and gemstones. And for some reason, someone my father knew told me, look, mineralogy is nice and a good place to be, but chemistry is a much broader field, and at your age, perhaps you don't know what you're going to do. So take the broader field and decide later what you do. So I went into chemistry. And actually, yes, it was a good decision. And what I wanted to do was very clear after 2 internships at former Bayer and former Höchst in America and Japan, and I wanted to work with customers. And so I decided to go to industry, not to academia. And I moved to Munich, mostly because of the mountains. I'm originally from the Rhenanian area where I'm living right now. So I like Carnival, but from Munich I came back for Carnival every time. But Munich is attractive both for skiing as for academia because the technical university there is one of the best in Germany. So I had a pretty good education and I had a pretty good time. And from Bavaria, I took 2 things home. One thing is my PhD degree and the other one is my wife. So after a year in France doing research, I joined those times Bayer. And the only way to work with customers was to go into polymers. I was not a polychemist from academia, but it was the only way to get into customer contact, to travel, to see customers, to make real products that people really can touch. And so I took the first opportunity that I had in polymers, and that was in what they call polyurethanes. And polyurethanes are probably not very common to the everyday knowledge. People would talk more for PET or PP or the plastics things, but you probably sit on polyurethane because flexible foam on a sofa is most probably polyurethane. A lot of mattresses are made from polyurethane. Every fridge in the world is insulated with polyurethane. We're talking about shoe soles. We're talking about district heating. We're talking about car seats and steering wheels. We're talking about instrument panels. So we're talking about a lot of different things. And many of them I have been responsible for. Since the formation of since about nearly 10 years, I'm back in research and working about fire resistance of plastics, of the new car smell, and more about the recycling of polymers. And here, and also when we met last time, I also became head of an industry association, which is called the Association for Chemistry and Economics, and is part of the Association of German Chemists, where I'm also part of the board. And so I'm getting a little bit of higher point of view of things, not only the world of this particular polymer that I'm being worked on, but also a little bit more about the general trends in industry, about the evolution of the chemical heavy industries, but also about life science industries. So you get to put your nose into more things than before, and that's something I really appreciate. It's a little bit like you have also the opportunity to talk to a lot of different people. And curiosity is driving us. So in the end, this is how I love also my association work. It's all about curiosity, about people helping to run projects and getting people into contact.
Yeah, that's great. And we will be talking a lot about getting people into contact actually today, because as I mentioned, I have quite some questions about collaboration, and specifically about collaboration between the industry and academia, because there are so many challenges. But I do believe that just by collaborating, we can move forward, and we can move forward much faster. So the very first question, specific question that I have to you is, do you work a lot with universities?
I particularly do that, yes. First of all, the company that I work for works with academia, and we have a lot of collaborations, but I particularly help one of the joint laboratories. I'm there helping advising there. And I have run co-advised or co-supervised two PhD students, one in the field of fire resistance in polymers and one in the case of new car smell. And you can find the papers. So the normal thing is that until a couple of years ago, I was only writing patents. But now, since this cooperation, you also can see that in the academic literature, what we are interested in. And we come to that a little bit later about the publication strategies. I do teaching also since, well, the first year of the COVID situation. So my first students I got for something like a couple of months, and then we were in lockdown. And since then, I have this hybrid type of teaching, partially in Jülich, which is highly academic city in between Cologne and Aachen. And this is a University of Applied Sciences where people study applied polymer sciences. And my predecessor that had it was highly teaching organic chemistry, and I thought people that are on a University of Applied Sciences should learn less about what they would need for a PhD that they anyways don't do, but they should learn more about business economics, business chemistry. And so one of my tasks and my targets for the future is to teach them more about the real life in industry. and a little bit less about academic parts of industry and about university, because people in polytechnics, they anyway have a target to go and earn money directly after their master thesis, while chemists in Germany usually go for a PhD like I did in the past. So university is doing this PhD kind of career, and the Fachhochschulen in German, so they will do the more direct entry into business, whatever that
Yeah.
then is. So yes, I'm doing teaching, I'm doing research with academia, I'm trying to get public funding for it, and it's not always easy, but this is the way I'm doing. Also, advisory as part of the Institute of Polymer Research in Dresden. They have sort of a association that supports them, and I'm the vice president there too. So a little bit giving advice what would be interesting for industry, and also learning about what is interesting in the academic world. So yes, I do quite a bit of that.
Yeah, that's great. So you kind of really bring your industrial experience to academia, which is really important. So it makes it easier for students to understand what to expect, because as we all know, this gap between the industry and academia, it's quite a big one. Do you work mostly with local European university, or do you also have connections with some universities in Asia, Americas, maybe Australia, just some other countries based on your professional experience?
Actually, I don't. We're running that in the company that I work for. We're running that as regional hubs. So Americans care for American University Corporation. Our Chinese colleagues care for Chinese collaboration. Japanese for the collaboration with Japanese universities. And if you want to make that point, there was this saying about the Olympics omitted New Zealand. Yes, we also omit New Zealand because we don't have a very strong position there with chemists also. But my focus is the European landscape.
Okay. But don't you think it would be nice to work with some other universities, because they might have some knowledge that European universities don't have?
Actually, we exchange. I'm reading the papers worldwide. So I don't
Hmm.
care. I don't care whether the author of a paper is German, American, or Greek. So I don't care for that. I care for interaction, which can be personal, and this is why Europe is easier. But I have regular meetings online with my American and Japanese Chinese colleagues, and we
Hmm.
exchange on academic collaboration. So I do know a little bit what people do, but the actual interaction, the lunch meetings or whatever you have with PhD students, that's something we restrict that to the regional hubs, because also it's a question of cost and time.
Hmm. Yeah.
So in the end, I have a pretty good idea about those things that are interested for me. I know who is doing what. Actually, if they publish and what they publish. And this holds both for academia as for startups. We're looking for those too, mainly if they come out of academia. There are a few countries where we need it more, but I was pleased that in the last big project that I started initially, there's quite a big footprint of Polish universities and Polish participants there. Because if you go, well, look for the patent statistic of the International Patent Organization, which is called WIPO, and make up the number of patents in both chemistry or environmental sciences is two of the categories that you can have, and make the quotient, the ratio of patents per inhabitant, and you see that we have not an equal landscape in Europe. We have a strong position in the Northwest, and we have with a lot of patents per capita. And the farther south you go and the farther east you go, the less presence you have of companies in the international intellectual property landscape. So we have to first move up Europe before we think about the world. And there's a lot to do. Looking even further east, I once wrote a little article on this situation of patents in chemistry from the former Soviet Union, and that was, I think, in the beginning of 2000s, Netherlands bypassed Russia in the number of patents per capita. Even I think in the number of total patents. So we see ups and downs in that. And to solve the problems of the world, we need academic papers, but we also need patents that be turned in technologies and products. And if only Germans and Dutch are taking the challenge, well, we lose the potential of something like 350 million Europeans. If I look to the people that are in the high school of my kids, we should, in some sense, include the Turkish communities too, which are formally not Europe, but they are also far behind. And they produce a lot. They are a highly industrialized nation, but turning industry products in knowledge that you can turn into money, that you can turn into global solutions, is the next step. And it needs a lot of freedom. And freedom is an issue in some countries in Europe.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately. But do you see any other ways or any other, not challenges maybe, but restrictions that prevent these companies to also go together with Germany, together with the Netherlands in terms of patents, in terms of papers? How can we improve this situation? How can we make like other European countries also go forward with innovations in chemistry?
Actually, I have the impression that company research is not very big in these kind of countries. These countries, mainly in the East, attracted a lot of production from Western companies based on easy access to land. So they got easier a site where they could place a production site, and there were reasonably well-educated people that were paid much less than they expected to be. And so there was an easy way to transfer production. Industrial research doesn't only need good universities, but it also needs a network from industry to industry that needs to have attractive research conditions in companies. And if you only transfer production, that doesn't mean that you have a research associated to that. And many people try to keep research in the West while doing production in the East. And we need to have some way of following that up and building up also research capacities there. And that's both the questions: where does the money come from that? And the money can come from subsidies, but right now subsidies from Europe go to academia in the East. So this is why we work very pleasantly with universities in Poland. But I don't know where the PhD students in Poland in the end up, whether they end up in industry research, whether they prefer to end up in academia. Actually, the career path for PhD in Poland, I have no idea. The same for Hungary, for Romania, or even farther east. I don't know the career path there. And so perhaps one day I'd really be interested to talk to people there and use my association hat to talk to people that are doing the same thing that I do in countries east and south of here. I know already that the French career paths are completely different. And if you want, I love a site in France, which is called My Job Glasses, where you can get very low-key advice from experienced people to students. And if I can do some advertisement for this site, I do that here. Because I get calls from French universities, mainly from the border to Germany, Mulhouse or Strasbourg. And they ask me, why are there so big differences in the career path between Germany and France?
The question that I have to you is, you as the person from the industry, how do you choose the universities to work with? Do you have any criteria? Do you look at some certain qualities, I know, of professors that you work with? How does it happen, this choice between all these different teams?
Well, there are two things to mention. First of all, industry is usually not interested in realizing the ideas of creative people, professors, PhD students in academia. We are very strong in industry in continuous optimization of what we do. And we have enormous power to implement change in existing production, existing technology. We are much less in disruptive initiatives. For that, people should start a startup. And then industry will have a look after a while and then invest once things turn out whether they are viable or not. So for disruption, and there's this famous Harvard Business Review article on why big companies can't innovate. This article is pretty true. We are engaged in doing the things we do as good and as we can, and at least better than everybody else. And so what we're looking in industry corporations is people that help us solve our problems. And so we look in what people publish. And if there are mainly, we're not looking into the chemistry itself, we're looking at the technology that they use. And all academic professors, teachers, or we're not only talking about universities, we have research institutes. And they have things they can do very well. They have technologies that they can do very well. And then we have a look, is there a link between what is interesting to us and the technologies that these people can do? And then we address them. But most of the time, the addressment is just to talk to them, not start a project directly. So what I would do is, you may recall the famous book of the Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, from Exupéry. And there's this famous story where he meets the fox, and the fox tells him, look, we have to get acquainted to each other. And this is why he comes every day at a certain time. And after a certain time, they expect that they'll be there. And this is what the future of academic experience is. You have to get acquainted to that. And this is why I talked about this association that supports the Institute of Polymer Research. This is why the other institutes have advisory boards with people from industry. This is just to get acquainted, just to learn about the problems of one hand and the interest of the other side. And if you one day find common interest, fine, you do a project. Projects in industry change, professors in academia change, with them their interest, but you need to really be in continuous exchange. You can't do it one hop on, hop off, like these famous city trips. So you take that famous saying of Ford, who said, you meet each other, you stay with each other, and eventually you work together. And this is the way it works. It's just not happening that you have a directory where you have a problem, you dial and you get a directory. That's not the way it works. It's about trust.
Yeah.
The other way around is that also happens quite a lot, that there are public calls. And the academic part looks for industry that could work in that respect. And they find one academic partner, and the academia starts with the idea of what could be the research project, and they find one industry partner, and the industry partner then collects an industry consortium. So you start with one industry enterprise, and then they start to collect their customers, their suppliers, other partners. And so you put together a consortium. And that can also be a pretty good way to get acquainted, to get to know each other. And then 3 years later, you make a bilateral project. So these consortia have not only the reason to work together and to have results, but also to get to know each other.
As you were talking about establishing startups as the way to bring academia research, disruptive innovation from academia to the industry. But when I was having another interview, we were talking about technology transfer offices. And we were talking about problems that are connected to technology transfer offices because the whole concept is very strange. The university has to establish these technology transfer offices when and these offices, they work on behalf of the university, but the university is not interested in scaling what they do. They are interested in papers, but still, do these technology transfer offices from the universities, do they contact you? Do they try
Yes, they
to
do that all
make
the
an
time.
effort?
They do that all the time. And I have never ever had something coming out of it. I appreciate if we want to make a cooperation and if they do the administration in an efficient way. And I have seen both. I have seen a technology office that stopped a collaboration by just not being able to run the administration in what they believed would be the legal way. And another transfer office, just something like 500 meters away, that ran a process extremely efficiently. There are companies that are trying to sell ideas, and I still do not understand the economics of that business. It's one of the things that is on my project list for the Association of Chemistry and Economics, to understand how a market can be established for ideas that others should implement into projects and products.
Well, the execution is the key. I mean, the ideas often they cost nothing. You need to do something with this idea. So you were talking about all these different ways of who comes first and who is the first one to make this first step towards this collaboration. But in general, who wants this collaboration between the industry and academia more? Is it the universities or is it the industry who needs it more?
Academia doesn't need industry for collaboration. Academia needs industry as a future place of work for their PhD student, because PhD students, at least in the number that we in Germany have, cannot stay all in academia. So the first thing is that we're talking about an exchange of highly educated, well-skilled scientists. And the difference between a master and a PhD is that a master will work certainly for a long time on ideas of other people, and they will improve it. But essentially, for a PhD, it's expected that he initiates projects himself after a year or 1.5, depending on how much time he needs to learn the new chemistry. But essentially, the independence of the running a project, about starting a project, developing a project, is different between a PhD and a master student. And in PhD, you not only learn some very specific chemistry that may be interesting or not, but you get a very good education on project management, academic project management, but at least it's a start. And you get a very good education in Germany normally, including the handcraft of chemistry. So doing experiments practically and designing experiments, doing collaborations. This is one of the changes from my time to now, that I see more and more PhD students running collaborations themselves. And that's important for industry, that you have run into collaborations in your PhD time, that you initiated these, that you have worked with people in other countries. So first of all, it's about people. We transfer know-how, we transfer science by people. They get their degree and they try to get hired by industry or whatever, or in other institutes or something like that. So that's the first thing that is important. And that helps university also because there's a perspective for the PhD students. So they know that there will be a career path after the PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first and common ground for industry and universities. The second is that we also learn from academic papers, from academic lectures. And the other way around, I teach at the university to teach the university, the people in the university, what is interesting to us, how we work. What industry should do more is publish where at places where academic researchers read. They don't read patents. Although in patents there's a lot of knowledge in the first part, but patents and there's very precise experimental part in the back, and in between there's a very boring part. And this is why I teach my people: just read the first two pages, or the second and the third, and read the experimental part, and that's what helps you with a patent. But essentially, we have to explain more what we do and the chemistry we are interested in. But on the other hand, the new open access means that you have to pay for publishing. There are some exceptions. But if you want to go through a peer review article where people would really be interested in, this is a lot of work and the return on investment is doubtful. So we don't tell the people that do academic research what we are working on. This is why I try to do that differently, but in general, we don't do that. And there's no one to translate science from patents to the place where people in academia read things.
Mm-hmm.
And on top, not all patents are translated, so now you have to go through the automated patent translate, which is also not always a pleasure. On the other hand, it's a lot of work for us to understand the academic research and transfer it in something which is affordable. This is, I believe, much easier for the life science part of it. But in material science, in chemical heavy industries, that's a difficult way to translate from academia to here. But evidently, there are people that work on it.
Yeah, thank you. So we were talking about quite some challenges, but can we just sum up these challenges when it comes to collaboration between the industry and academia? And do you see any solution to these challenges?
Well, first of all, you have to get acquainted. Second, you have to accept that there are differences in the way we work. There was this saying in a presentation of it was, I think, a Scottish chemist that said, good science is never reproducible. That was in Leipzig, I think, last year. And this is something industry can never accept. We have to be reproducible 365 days a year in, year out. This is why we run good old boring chemistry, and we are working with chemistry that's 30-year old. This is not attractive for a professor to optimize chemistry that is 30 years old. But for us, it's a sorting out process where you see what chemistry works and what chemistry doesn't work. Philosophy of science, if you go to Bruno Latour, who says, in a sense, science is putting things into boxes and close them and then build upon them. So things that are in a box and that have been working 20 years in academia, we will probably be relying on that. And we just build on that. But it's not the cutting edge stuff that where we don't know whether it's reliable or not. So in the end, we have to accept that things are different between us. But the joint basis is the joint interest in young people, the joint interest in educating and promoting young people, and the joint interest in talking to each other and learn from each other, even in if you're more than a 60-year-old, you still have to learn from people in academia about new tools. Because if I would do my job with only the toolbox that I have from 1992 when I got my degree, well, if you go now to someone putting photovoltaics on roofs, and if he had only the tools of the 1980s, he would have a hard job. So masons have to improve their tools, chemists have to improve their tools, and the joint basis for academic and industry research is learning. And this is why boards and places to meet are so highly important. And this is why the Association of Chemical and Industry has just meeting on a beer. A couple of chemists, a dozen or two, meet on a beer and just exchange. Every 3 months or so, always in your close, so you don't have to drive too far. And we just believe that you have to meet people. And it has to be easy. It doesn't have to be a European project or something like that. It has to be low key. And this is why we believe in just informal networks.
Yeah, I agree that such meetings, they really give a lot to think about. And as you said earlier, they do build trust. And as we are talking about meetings, we met at the Materials Week conference this summer. And after this conference, you made a post where you mentioned an increasing gap between young scientists that are intrigued the EU Commission's safe and sustainable by design recommendation and industry laboratory chemists that might get limited in the options to solve a problem and face an increasing request for data and documentation. And I just wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit about it, because I found this post really interesting.
Well, first of all, for young people, having a safe environment is just mostly in line with what they expect. They're talking about sustainability, they're talking about a chemistry which is not confronting the most 80% of the people that have the impression that chemistry is a necessary evil. But they want to be appreciated by people with the thing they do, and I can very much support that. And it's reasonable what from an intellectual point of view, what the European Commission does is essentially you go to the sports of biathlon, which is not in the Summer Olympics, but in the Winter Olympics. And what they say, if you take your time, take your target, and hit all 5 targets, you don't have to go the extra round of 150 meters or 20 seconds. So you rather take a few seconds more, take your breath, and hit the targets better. Then you don't have to go the extra mile. That's the philosophy of safe and sustainable by design. And that's reasonable. Every Olympic starter in biathlon would think the same way. And no one goes the extra round for free and because on purpose. So this is the way the European Commission thinks, and it's intellectually correct. But the situation in industry is a little bit more complex, if you like. The situation is that in order to have the process that is involved in the safe and sustainable by design recommendation is that you already have your stage gate process. At least big companies have that. I doubt that most of the small ones have it, but the big ones usually have it. And you have an add-on on that too. So you have, as a researcher, to fill out more forms to make sure that the requirements of this recommendation have been fulfilled. Because in the end, there will be an auditor coming into your laboratory, starting with the ISO 9000, but it could also be an auditor of a financial institution that checks your sustainability reporting. Or it could be for a small company, even the bank that asks you, are you following the safe and sustainability recommendations? And then you have to present the files where you say, yes, I checked everything before I started my laboratory work. And so in the end, it's about the work-life balance of the people in the laboratories, because documentation of all these kind of requirements takes time. And most of these requirements, particularly if it's getting into the range of financial institutions, if they start to look into your processes, if it goes into taxonomy, even farther from the European point of view, then it is hardly delegable. Most people would put that on the C-level responsibility. So it's about the work-life balance of the C-level. And it's about the work-life balance in the laboratory. How much documentation do you have? Even if you look into the safety data sheet every time you want to do something, do you have to document that you have looked into it? And do you have to document that you thought about the processes that could be at your customer, if you know them? Traders usually must not know what their customers do. So in the end, if you sell products to traders, you may not even know what happens. So there will be a discussion about data. So in the end, the reality is that people want to go home in the evening and not do documentation on what they have thought of. So write down what they think anyways about. So there must be a way to find, on one hand, the reasonable approach, and the other way, the reason that people cannot just add 2 hours on top of their normal work. Or if they can, well, it's a challenge whether they should. If you do that on the C-level, the 2 or 3 hours that you spend on documentation of SSbD for the next audit, you don't spend on the next investment project. And we have an investment problem in Europe.
Yeah.
On even the small companies are under investment, in at least many of them. It's just a matter of where you spend your time and where you're expected to spend your time. And the fact that you get your projects easier without an extra mile to go, well, I don't see that, because most people already do that. They just write it down. So it's more about the documentation and the problem that even if the EU says it's not too much, every company adds on top to make really sure that no audit goes wrong. So on 1 hour requested, you add 2 hours from internal requirements that make sure that nothing happens that could be an irritation for someone. So I think this is the main reason why we have a gap between reality and the formally and intellectually very correct way of the proposal. And there needs to be a way of finding a way between these two extremes. And our recommendation of the VC Association of Chemistry and Economics will mostly that, well, first of all, it's about respecting the work-life balance of the people that direct it. But we better start with public interest entities. So big companies, big research institutions that do already have the staffs and that just run the processes a little bit different, that just have to adapt their processes. The second that I would propose is that we use for SSbD only after a certain time of the project, and start with peer review, which is the normal academic way of challenging projects and ideas, and start with safe, sustainable by design, only technical readiness level 5 or so, because many projects are run in laboratories, and the decision who produces it, whether you have a toll producer, you invest yourself, whether you find a partner in India or a partner in Italy, that decision is not taken very early, because you will never know what to negotiate until you have the process, at least an idea about it. So My idea is to have a certain start only later in the project, to have a certain differentiation between the size of the project, the companies that you address or the research institutions that you have, and that you also start with the processes that the companies have. And there's a very good example of that. You start with just people have to explain how they do it. And over time, you will learn, even as the EU Commission, they will learn how big companies do it. And probably BASF is going to do it differently than Sanofi or Eni in Italy. And in the end, there will be a lot of learning because every company has to explain how they do. And eventually, industry has one strength. They sit together and do norms, standards. It takes a while, these processes, but they are fully established. And earlier or later, if everyone has published how they do it, given competition laws permits, and EU sits on the same table to make sure they don't discuss prices, they will sit together and align their processes over time. And in the end, you get a standard process. But it's a different way of getting there. And you take the European Standard Organization, the ISO, which is established, and you use that one for getting the alignment where you want to go. And it's a more democratic process than starting from the Commission with a recommendation and having a vote of the European Parliament, which is democratic, but well, there are only few that really worked themselves into this. Some processes, you just take the established processes like the peer review from academia or the standardization process from industry, and you get there. And you get there quite surely and quite predictably. Sometimes it's not about inventing the wheel anew.
But do you believe it's going to work for SSbD framework in general? Like, do you think that the European Commission and everyone involved in this project will listen to the industry and do it the way that it's going to work for everyone and everyone will be
I
happy?
don't think that the situation is that chemistry in the chemical industry can ask for a lot of things, given the Green Deal and these kind of things. So, but the question is really the question of how will compliance be enforced, and how will the individual people be trying to find workarounds, and how much will be they punished for their workarounds. So everybody will try to simplify the world as good as he can, and this will be on the laboratory level, not on the company level. Companies will try to be compliant, but every individual will try to find a workaround and simplify life based on the fact that they want to go home at 6 or 7 in the evening.
Yeah, well, let's see how it's going to move forward. I mean, they mentioned that it's not going to
There will
become
be
a regulation.
the young people that I talked about in my post, they will be the ones that run it over time. They will be hired and they're going to be the ones that are in the laboratories working with it. And I'm going to, my students last winter term already got an introduction in my lecture in Jülich, and I will extend and improve that for the next winter term. So the people that I educate will at least know how the proposal is right now, and they will have to find their way how to work with it. I can't teach them how to work with it because I don't know where they're going to work, but they at least will not be completely surprised about what's coming up to them.
I found two different sources with your biography, and they mentioned different amount of years that you dedicated to working on environmental policy. And some mentioned that 30 years, another mentioned that 40 years, but nevertheless, you spent a lot of time working on environmental policy absolutely voluntarily. Which projects that you took part in do you consider to be the most successful, and were there successful projects?
started differently. I started when I was a PhD student, or even a little bit before, with what they call ecologic market economy, and what they now have as a emission trade policy in Europe. This is what I started based on the academic work of Holger Bonus at the University of Constance, who brought that idea from America. And I got intrigued into it when I was still a pupil. And that was something that I took into the young liberals in Bavaria. And for some reasons, then I became the head of the environmental policy of the young liberals for a while. And this is probably because you add 10 more years, because that must have been started something like 1988 or something like that. And I did it for quite a while until I reached the age of 35. Then you're no longer a young one. And then in 1999, we got back into the Municipal Council of Cologne, where we were out before, and they recalled that I was in there, and they asked me whether I could take over that responsibility. I do that now for about 2 years as a greenhorn and rookie. I had the opportunity to change a few things and influence a few things, and since 2002, I'm always responsible for the minority part of it. I did influence a few things, and in order to have formal influence, you don't have if you are the minority. That's the way democracy is. But you have to have a role as a minority to have influence in an informal way by just talking to people based on the competence that they believe you have and whether they listen to you or not. And so my role was to promote ideas in an informal way, which is on the basis of my formal role. I think since 2002, my most important role was to show that no politics are without alternative. And this is the important way of democracy, that no one can say there's no alternative. There was more than one often that we are in the Municipal Council on Environmental Affairs, we are 13. There more than once that I voted one against 12. But there was an alternative. And if people now say, well, there's no alternative, there always is. And it's important that someone shows it. And this is why opposition has an important role. And I do that for 25 years. And I have no problem with that. I'd rather influence things easier, but in the end, in municipal politics, even if you are a majority, the interaction between administration and unpaid politics is more complex than same in Warsaw or in the Bundestag in Berlin, where things are more formal and different. But in a city, things are more complicated. And you need to learn that, and I have an impression it works. So this is one thing, and this is the difference to companies that I want to make, because companies do have opposition, but no one knows who it is. The structures are very informal. They are very volatile. They are also volatile from time to time. There are times when there's very little opposition. There are times when there is opposition on the way forward. And the public only notices very rarely that in the board there were different opinions, and someone left the board because he felt his opinion was not promoted well enough. But in the normal case, it's more transparent in a municipal council or in something else, that you do have the roles and that you play your role. And that's part of democracy. And I'm really, really happy that I played that role for now 20 years. And I do intend to do it at least for 5-6 more years, because the role is important. And it's also important that you play it with a highly competent background, and for me it's not only the chemistry, but I have an MBA from Kellogg and WHU, which is a very good education to my impression. And so I can manage both the scientific side of environment politics as the economic side of how this is run in Cologne in sewage treatment or in municipal waste treatment and so on. So also can have a good opinion on the financial sustainability, because it's certainly not an idea that we transfer the load and the burden of what we have to do to my 5 children and to all the other children that are around here. It's not only about my kind of kids, it's about quite a few million kids that have to bear a lot and shouldn't bear too much on top of what we have to do in the transformation now.
Yeah, but as you're talking about children, by the way, I have another question to you, because when we had this conversation on Cyprus, you mentioned that you work a lot with younger generation. What is the biggest difference, do you think, between the younger generation and your generation?
Well, talking about generations, normally you have enormous diversity, and it always was like that. But actually, when I grew up, we had a very was a nearly simple way of looking to the world, because we had the simple separation of the Cold War. It was about the discussion about nuclear missiles, SS-20 and Pershing, that I lost my first girlfriend. So that was the way of old people will notice that still. And I went to the army, and my girlfriend didn't like that. She was on the other side of that. So in the end, there was a very easy way where you were. And on top, you didn't interact with people from China or Russia because they were on the other side. People traveled less. So having a weekend trip to Mallorca or to something like that was just out of reach. Airline trips, even within Germany, were costing the equivalent of 1,000 euros now. And now you get that trip to Spain for $50 or something like that. So people had seen less of the world, and the world was more restricted, but it looked a little bit easier from where the good ones were and the bad ones were. And the second was, our generation was highly competitive within Germany because we were a lot and we were competing for jobs.
Mhm.
And we had times with 10% unemployment in Germany no one would ever think of right now. There were more people than my wife didn't get a job initially because there were just too many chemists in 1994 for the jobs that were available. So that's a situation that young people now, if they have a reasonable good education, will not experience. They have more the problem of choosing what to do. On the other hand, things are more complicated because they have global competition. There are now people from China, from Africa, are coming here from all kinds of places in the world that are as mobile as our people. They are traveling, they are looking for jobs, they are looking for opportunities. And so competition is not within their classmates, but competition is with people that they would never have thought of. And I think many people have a little bit of problem with feeling themselves in global competition. I don't know what situation is better, but I see that you're not living in the country where you grew up. My kids still have that pleasure, but they also were living outside, so at least one of them. So in the end, globalization is also the reason of a different mindset. And I think that could be a difference between the generation. how you handle this type of globalization, whether you are afraid of global competition, whether you would like to have the good old times back when atomic missiles were deperning an iron wall. I don't know. I wouldn't go back. I think good politics, good science is not done with looking into the rear mirror in your car, but you're looking to the front and not too much to the rear. You should look to the rear whether some people are going to bypass you, and the risk is here in Germany that people are bypassing you. But you have to look forward, and this is what I can recommend to the young people. And they do differently because we didn't have a virtual world at that point. Imagine in 1938 doing something like this, we would have met in a movie studio.
Yeah.
And probably we wouldn't have even met because you were growing up on the other side of the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, definitely. But what do you think this younger generation and younger generation of scientists in chemistry will bring to the chemistry?
Well, first of all, the academic chemistry is changing completely. We just decided in Germany to skip genetic engineering, at least in industry. What we see is a merger of biology and chemistry. I yesterday discussed with a young chemist from Tübingen who is merging even inorganic chemistry with environmental science and biology. So usually in the old times it was organic chemistry that was linked somehow to biology through biochemistry, but now it's even the inorganic part. And in some sense it was also my PhD student thesis. And but the tools of working with enzymes and so on will be part of normal chemistry. So this is something, merger of sciences is something that is interesting, is fun, and we have to adapt our academic world, because people that are working in between the fields of science have issues in careers, because the chairs of in academia are still designed according to the old structures. So you have to first get a chair, and then you can move into the ranges left and right, something like that. So we have to work with the merger of sciences. That's interesting, and we also have to communicate that. And the Association of Chemistry and Economics is working on the border of economics, so economic sciences and chemistry. So that's at least our intention to do. Economics is a science. My grandfather made a famous presentation in 1952, designing economics as a business economics as a science. And it has established, and now we are working on the border, like on between economics and chemistry, as we work between physics and chemistry in physical chemistry, or in the meeting of biology and chemistry and biochemistry, or in synthetic biology. So you can see it from both sides, and that's interesting. And I love that, because that's where creativity comes in, because people from different viewpoints meet, and they have their different languages. They have to learn the language of the other one, and then they can do amazing things, because oh, I'd never thought about that. So that's one thing that I love about the new type of chemistry. The second one is meeting IT and or tech and chemistry. So it's all about data. And we hired in the company that I work for, I think 24 of computer scientists, chemists before the COVID crisis. And then we didn't have the money to expand too much in that, at least not in human resources. We still have good and increasingly good computers. So we have to teach young people that chemistry is also a lot about computer chemistry. We're discussing that, well, you learn I have had Latin in school. We're talking about in vitro, which is in glassware, and we're talking about in silico, which means on silicon chips. And that meets in chemistry right now. And from an industrial point of view, the most interesting thing for the chemists that then move from academia to industry will be to find a way to make money out of data. We know how to make money out of a ton of chemical, but what do we make out of data? And this is the economics of data is one of the very interesting thing in the business chemistry. And to be honest, I don't have a solution. That's the solution has to be found by the next generation, and I'm pretty sure they will find one.
Yeah.
But the next, that's the small scale. That's the business economics perspective. The global perspective is evidently that you have to find a living for 10 billion people on the world, and that will not work without science. And it doesn't matter what kind of science. As I told you, they merge anyways. And whether you're a physicist, an engineer, a biologist, or a chemist, they all have to work together with people from informatics or mathematics and to solve those problems. And the biggest problems that I see is to separate out molecules. You will not, I give you 3 examples because that is not easy to understand immediately. The first thing is let's start with water. You have a huge amount of water in the sea, and it contains something like 3.5% salt. So you can't drink it easily. So there's a lot of chemistry involved in desalination, and we spend a lot of energy, fossil energy, on desalination, and we will increasingly use that because people need that water. And plants need that water. In the end, we want to eat these plants, and perhaps we even want to make chemistry with these plants. There's a lot of interesting chemistry based on renewable sources. So in the end, we need that water. So we have to find a way to clean water. And that's the salt in the sea, but it's also the contaminants that we have in our sewage water. So you separate something like 970 kilograms of water and 30 grams of something else, and then, or 30 kilograms of something else to have a cubic meter of water. So that's one of the challenges that doesn't work without physics and chemistry, or biology, if you like, in water treatment. Second is you want to clean up the world. So you have to find an economic incentive to collect all the plastic waste around, all the other waste, minerals, glass, whatever, to collect it and take it back and make money out of that. So there has to be a value in post-consumer materials, and how to create value. That's a lot of engineering, chemistry, enzymatic, which could be biology. So in the end, cleaning up a few kilograms in a natural reserve is a lot of work because these tiny particles. So again, you have to find a way to get very little quantity out of huge something. And the third one is even more easy to see. We have something like 400 ppm of CO2 in the air, order of magnitude, which is very little, and you want to get it out of there. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of chemistry being done on how to get carbon dioxide out of the air, and most probably we will have to do that. And most probably we'll have to build photovoltaic plants to run these kind of absorption plants. And photovoltaics is silicon, and silicon is chemistry. So in the end, we have to have better photovoltaics to run plants that eliminate a tiny little bit of CO2 out of a lot of air. So in the end, chemistry is working a little bit like the same old things with the support now of computer and chemistry, because else we couldn't do it. But new chemists will have a lot of work. But also they have to work with economists, because somehow you always have to find a business model to get some idea on how to get the money back. Well, And you have to get the money back because the people that do this science will have to pay the rent, want to send their kids to school, want to buy mobile phones for their kids, and sometimes want to go see the world. And so, and it's good that they see the world. I like that much better than the old times when we were not able to go to Vietnam or something else. Meeting the world means you get more tolerant in normal cases, and you see how people live. And so, yes, we need all that, and we need to manage that, and we need to pay the hamburger or whatever you want, or the vegetarian curry or whatever you want to eat to the people. And this is why we need a combination of chemistry and economics, or science and economics. I will not exclude biology and physics because they anyways somehow merge with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Rolf. I think I have the last question for you. And this question is about your plans for the future because you have so many different activities.
Well, my plans for the future was there's probably no career anymore with 60. This is quite evident, and so this is something that is not driving me anymore. What's driving me is a little bit the aspect that I make up. I inherited from my father a couple of apple trees and plum trees and so on that my grandfather has planted. They die now. Apple trees have a certain lifetime. It's not like the oak trees that grow for many hundred years, but they have a lifetime. And so I have to replant them. If I want to have my grandchildren continue the family. So the prime interest right now is to pass on things, and this is planting trees, planting ideas into the chemists that come up and take over the laboratories left and right down the aisle where I have my office, planting ideas into the people that run the Association of Chemistry and Economics. Melanie is just finishing her PhD and starting her career, so I try to help her to get up and running. And so it's not only the next generation Albach which is important, but the next generation of chemists. And so I have still the idea of educating young people in municipal economics, municipal politics. At least for the next 5 years, I will do that. And it's about my students that I want to educate as good as I can to what's facing them. And we talked about the challenges. And for instance, a very defined project that I'm still working on is the mentoring projects that I see that are necessary. And in my first term in the board of the Association of the German Chemists, I didn't succeed in modernizing the structure there and growing the opportunities, growing the offers. And this trip is not over. I do believe that we need mentoring, and we need more, and we need it low key, and we need it the way we talk today. I think globalization means that we do have to teach people. And well, teaching is the wrong word. We have to talk to people. Teaching means a sort of hierarchy between teacher and pupil, the old Japanese of the sensei role. I do not think that this is the way, because I learned from my mentee on the digital world more than he may learn about the economic world of the industry from me. So we need to keep the exchange, and we need to grow that exchange. And so what we call the Chemento is one of my projects for the future. I still have a lot of ideas that I shouldn't talk here, because if I have ideas in chemistry, they're usually not patented, and so I shouldn't publish it in your podcast here.
Yeah, definitely.
But one of the fun things that I had in my last 5 years was talk to the recycling industry. So much can be said. That's something completely new. because we talk to physics and biologists all the time. We never talk to people that do recycling, and talking to people that never talked to chemistry before was the most exciting experience that I had in the last 5 to 7 years. And this will continue, hopefully, for the next couple of 10 years, as long as I can do it.
So yeah, you have a lot of exciting plans, and I just wish you a smooth realization of all of them.
Thanks a lot. And I appreciate your plans, and I appreciate that you get people talking and people communicating. And that's something that we chemists need help. And I appreciate your help in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was just such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Rolf, for your time. And I learned a lot, and I saw a completely different perspective, despite the fact that, yeah, I know people from different areas. It's still a lot of new things for me to learn. Thank you so much, Rolf.
Thanks a lot, and hope to meet you again soon. And if you ever come by here, drop me a line.
Of course, I would be happy to meet you too, Rolf. Thank you.